YouTube live stream up and running, and we got a bunch of attendees on. So a few
Rock
more will probably pile in the next moment. But how's your nice fall day here in Michigan?
Oh man, it's beautiful. I was tempted to hold it outside. I like what you do in your garage, man. But my audio sucks when I get the wind and everything going, so it doesn't work well for me.
Oh, I got to change camera. You reminded me. There we go. The ultimate playland.
That is fantastic.
So we're getting started. It's nice. You kind of look like you have a gray screen behind you. So Zoom backgrounds probably are the in thing here. You got any good Zoom backgrounds?
Yeah, no, I do not. You know, we're doing more in WebEx these days, so I got all the WebEx ones, but that is a blast. You know, you call someone, I'm like, wow, that really looks nice. It looks like you're in a beach, and they're like, no, it's a background. I'm like, oh, you got me.
Oh man, I don't have many Zoom backgrounds, but yeah, I like this one. I have a swing. You can swing, you can box. I put this is so the kids have like a rope gym climbing thing.
Oh, nice.
So all right, cool. I'm just posting our live stream, and thanks for everybody for waiting as we get started. You know, you gotta like hit all the hashtags, right? What's your any favorite hashtags you're recommending as I post this on LinkedIn?
No.
The audience, what hashtags do you follow on LinkedIn? That's a good one, right?
I don't. I do look at the design hashtags, but that's about it.
That's not gonna attract anybody.
No, it doesn't. That's why I'm there.
We already got some oh wait, Q&A. Are we turning chat on? Is chat not on by default anymore? That's a great question. Zoom is changing all these settings on us. Oh, there's chat. Chat should work. I wonder if there's like these crazy Zoom security settings somewhere that I'm not seeing.
Making things all fancy.
Says it's turned off for us. Man, ask all to unmute. Oh, we could do everyone can talk. Does that work?
You are a brave man.
Lock webinar, mute participate. Sorry, everyone's like, man, these people really don't have their stuff together. I don't see it. That's kind of weird. Like, I'll have to look at the settings. Allow attendees to chat with all panelists and attendees. Oh, try it now. Try it now, Amanda. Does the chat work? Folks, everybody on chat, what are your favorite? Oh, it totally works. Awesome. Any favorite hashtags? No favorite hashtags? All right, we're 4 minutes in and we're gonna get started, I promise. I'm gonna post this, and thanks for being patient. I had another call back up to this, so that's why I'm a little bit late today. But so we're talking zero trust, Wolfgang. And do you want to give a quick intro before we hop in on yourself and what's new these days around zero trust and Duo?
Sure, absolutely. So I am, as Xero said, I'm with Duo, advisory CISO with Duo. Formerly was in healthcare and financial services, and got beat up, took my lumps. Spent 5 years doing consulting before coming across to the Duo side. And very happy there, focusing in on zero trust and on passwordless. So you want me to explain what zero trust is, or should we just like leave that
we're gonna
open?
I mean, we're gonna get there, but I haven't showed my intro screen. So.
Oh, you got an intro screen and everything. This is really fancy.
There you go. Today it's oh man, backwards. It's Wolfgang and myself. So hey, thanks for joining. No, this is fun, and yeah, you're completely right. I think on the call today, it's like, hey, the first thing is a lot of people ask, what really is zero trust? Is definitely on top of my mind, and something I think you can fill us in well on.
Yeah, and there's just so much noise about it. I think part of the problem is that like any loaded term, everyone jumped on and said, what we do is zero trust. What we do is zero trust. You don't trust people. I don't trust people. That clearly I'm doing zero trust. And every vendor under the sun has a zero trust story, but it tends to obscure some really strong fundamental security principles, right?
And I always joke, but the term zero trust to me, and it's kind of what you just said, like it's synonymous with security now.
It really has.
I think it was for a little while because it's a big marketing term, but I think it's swinging back around where people realize there's some fundamentals to it which are incredibly important. So yeah, what are those fundamentals to you?
Well, I think the watermark for that was the NIST process, and which finally resulted in a standard this year, a month ago in August, which is not when you want to release. You never release a standard in 2020. I think that's never too busy paying attention to all of this. But zero trust. The principles are, hey, for so long we let people log in, and then we assumed that the permissions we had set up were sufficient. We assumed that the RBAC was good. We assumed that people were trustworthy. We assumed that the people were really who they said they were. All those sort of things to build trust in the authentication before people even get to using apps, get to using the network.
Hey, and as far as getting started with zero trust, right? Like, what's the real low hanging fruit? By the way, I added a panelist just because I don't even know if she's on, but Amanda Berlin, who's one of our security detection engineers. So she might have some fun comments to mention as we're talking.
She was trolling me over Twitter earlier, so I gotta imagine you add her in. It's either going to go fun or go off the rails, or maybe a little bit of both.
So I'm totally here, but I'm eating lunch. So expect minimum trolling.
Oh, that's good. What was she trolling you about?
Well, one of the things she was saying on Twitter is that everyone should just come into chat, throw in a random word as a question, and watch me dance and try and tie it back to zero trust.
And that's why she got so mad that chat wasn't enabled.
You see, she's working this.
Hey, so on the zero trust side, right? It's like, help me understand. I understand the concept of least privilege. It's like, what's the low hanging fruit that people really should be knocking out? Because you can get overwhelmed by the concept of zero trusting everything, or getting too zero trusty.
Yeah.
Is my thought. But for a lot of small, medium sized businesses, right? It's like, yeah, what are like the 3 to 5 things that they can be doing to make sure that they're getting the right value out of zero trust?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I was talking to an organization. They're like, we don't want to do that. We don't have money for this other thing. We're not ready to do this. We don't want to deploy agents, but please tell me how I'm going to do zero trust and make sure that I'm doing it across all my apps and all the things I'm building in my infrastructure. I'm like, you everything we need to do a trusted user, a trusted device, a trusted application, you just said you don't have the ability to do. When it comes to low hanging fruit, I think the strong authentication properties of multi-factor are one place to start, because where are most of the threats coming from? They're coming from stolen identities, as we know. And the other thing is combining that with strong authentication on the device side, looking for known devices. Is the device healthy? Is it up to date? And then we can get to slightly higher fruit, like is the device known and up to date? And does the AV say that you're free from malware, right? Is there good security properties about the device that you're using to connect up to?
Yeah, no, and I agree. It's getting the basics in line. I'm still shocked a lot of times, and there's probably people on this call that still haven't deployed multi-factor. I just got off another call, right, where they hadn't deployed multi-factor and they got owned. And there's a ton of different tactics and techniques in as far as how that's happening, right? Whether it's password compromise or password spraying. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting coming from the angle of, I think, the aspect of making sure these controls are in place. The other interesting side, I think, is what I've seen coming from the prevention side. Like a lot of it in zero trust is about prevention, but I think the detection side has really been interesting to me as well, because some things I've learned is it's like, well, yeah, zero trust also includes principles like making sure that you don't have an RDP connection on the internet. And the reality is a lot of companies do, right? And you want to detect that kind of stuff when it does happen. And so much of it, I think there is a lot to do with misconfiguration or just a lack of education of knowing that you're not supposed to be doing certain things.
There certainly is, and I think there's a couple of things you said there I want to pull out, and one is we talk in this industry again and again and again, ad nauseum, I might say, about defense in depth, right? You need to have a stack of tools. You need to have stacks and stacks of blinking boxes and AI ML magic sauce, and make sure that's nice and really deep. But the reality is the companies that get owned, maybe they've deployed multi-factor, maybe they deployed monitoring, but they're only doing it here, and they've got thousands of apps. They've got a bunch of different IT services, but they're really deep right here. So I think one of the things that that we need to also consider is the width of defense, right? How widely are we deploying prevention, and how widely are we looking in deploying detection?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's like you put it on one thing and it's like, oh, checkbox, got it covered, right? And there's a whole nother area you're just leaving the door open in that regard. So, hey, on the topic of ML and AI, what do you think, Amanda? Sandwich in the mouth, sorry.
Very, very few people do it correctly, if at all. A lot of people think that correlation is the same thing as machine learning, and there's probably, I don't know, a very, very small handful of people that actually do AI.
Well, in AI takes time, right? So one of the things, let me first put AI in context of zero trust, and then let me talk about the spring. So in when we talk about trust, the low-hanging fruit, of course, is strong authentication of the user, strong authentication of the devices. But we also have to look at what can we tell about the behavior, what can we tell about where they're coming from, how they're acting, right? There's a whole bunch of detection that is a trust inference. Part of that, of course, could be UEBA. So I talked to a whole bunch of my peers this spring because I was like, hey, look, you told me you just bought the most awesome UEBA tool. What happened when in February, 16% of your workforce was work from home? In April, 78% of your workforce was work from home. And in June, that went back to 50, 60%, right? And we're still kind of bouncing back and forth. What happened to those great security robots you bought? And to a person, like, look, they went insane because it takes 6 months to a year to train. So the minute the business shifted, everything was an alert, right? The robots were panicking. The AI was setting up a bunch of alerts. And just about every peer that I've talked to during that point in time said, I unplugged it. I unplugged it, and we'll go back when things settle.
Yep. No, it's I think to some extent, right? It's kind of comical. Sometimes I talk to people and they have like no detection capabilities and no preventative security in place. And the number one requirement of their project is like, I need ML or AI. And I kind of laugh. It's like like you need two-factor, but you want to make sure that it runs on a SQL database. Like it just doesn't make like underlying or like, blockchain's another one that's a big fan of mine, or I'm a big fan of, right? That's kind of funny from a marketing term, where it's like it has this potential to, yes, be disruptive. However, it's more or less the underlying technology that people aren't really going to care about. It's going to be inherent, more or less is my take. So what on the zero trust side, right? Like where, what do you see adoption happening? And I think, as you mentioned, the COVID crisis, work from home. I'm working from my garage. I kind of always joke, it's like, hey, at Duo, we always said we were building a company from a garage, or people would joke about that, or our competitors would. And now I tell people like, no, we actually are. No, it's fun. We're all work from home for the most part. But yeah, what impacts on Zero Trust have you seen since the adoption or the push for remote work and work from home?
Yeah. So the pandemic has been one of the most significant drivers to moving this technology forward. And Brian Sanders in chat said something I think was really important. He said, never trust, always verify, right? As opposed to what we do often is like, oh, we'll trust them and we'll check later. This concept of default deny that is implicit in Zero Trust, along with this concept of, hey, we're going to allow connections from anywhere. We're going to allow people to connect up over the internet and not worry about a VPN. So a lot of the fundamentals that you needed to do work from home and to respond to the pandemic were in place. So we've seen a significant increase. In the beginning of the year, I saw around 40% of the organizations I was talking with had active Zero Trust projects, and around 10% had, implemented Zero Trust and were tuning in and working on the with side of defense, like I was talking about. By the end of this year, last week I did a workshop with 40 organizations, and all of them, every single one of them, had a Zero Trust initiative. And again, we still had maybe 10, 15, 20% that had something implemented, who are looking to do more. But everyone was like, all right, we get it. What are we going to do? How are we going to make this work?
I always think like SaaS is the ultimate Zero Trust, right? So like, it's like, well, it's already kind of built that way by default as more people move to it. But yeah, when you have people actually outside the business four walls, it becomes particularly important to start doing these things. And I think the concept of the kids at home too, end up using the work devices, even though they shouldn't. I don't let my kid do that, right? But yeah, there's just inherently a ton more risk that people need to recognize.
You got kids at home using the devices. You got people at home, using whatever device is closest to them as opposed to the corporate-owned device. So there's certainly a lot of risk. The other thing is interesting, and I've been calling this the Golden Girls Friends principle. So like the first, 100 days of lockdown, do you find yourself like turning on your favorite television show? Like, oh, I really liked Friends, or I really liked Star Trek, so going back to those reruns?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah, it's comfortable, it. So I was reading this psychology study that said in times of stress, people reach for what they know and have less risk tolerance for what they don't. And what I think we're seeing from a CISO perspective is that means we're doubling down on the controls we know and trust. We know, a good endpoint protection works. We know good honeypot technology, when properly, implemented, works. We know good correlation and alerting works. We know good MFA works, right? These are our friends, our Golden Girls, and our Star Trek. And we're going to reach for those when we're in times of stress to build something, as opposed to trying some technology that's still very unproven and you don't have a lot of confidence in.
Yeah, and I think that those controls, like you're talking about, it's like, yeah, they're fundamentally, right, getting the basics in place so that you're able to block and tackle. Not any one of those are in its own gonna prevent everything. But yeah, when you have MFA and you have good EDR and you have good detection capabilities, certainly you're going to be much further ahead in that regard. And I do think the concept, it's like, well, yeah, how we did things a little bit changed, like your firewall, like not as applicable anymore. Needing some of the newer technologies that support BYOD is another good example where when things were in the office, you could use some older gen products that necessarily weren't BYOD focused. So what do you think the biggest challenge is in Zero Trust? In your take, and I have my thoughts, but you know, what are the later stages that people just never get to, or what things?
Yeah,
what things, if you look at it, are like, okay, that's a pipe dream, right?
So the initial part that I mentioned is still a challenge for many folks. Getting the width right, making sure I'm covering all my applications, making sure I'm covering all my open exposed points. That's really is a understated challenge in the early stages. When we start going more advanced, and that's Zero Trust for the workforce. When we start thinking about all the other identities that authenticate in our environment, our application services that we're building, our equipment that we're maintaining, right? Med floor, manufacturing spaces, those sort of things. We start thinking about those types of equipment. That's where we get into like that second stage. The first stage with the workforce is pretty quick, and the challenge there is making sure that we've got good width of our defense. The second stage oftentimes is wrapping in these concepts into applications and into network access controls for heavy equipment. And those stages tend to also run into a lot of challenges because no one has a good diagram of what they have. In the development environment, things are moving very quickly. In the manufacturing environment, things are moving so slowly that no one wants to touch it. And balancing those things out and making sure you've got good trust over your identities can really add a lot of time.
Hey, one cool tool that comes to mind when you said the getting visibility into all these devices. I don't know if you've seen HD Moore's new tool, Rumble.run.
No, I haven't. Is it good?
Oh, it's great. I mean, literally, so first off, I was like, all right, in order to run this, it looks like I need to spin up a Linux server, right? And I don't know what just happened to my video, but I was like, that's I can do that, but like that takes time, right? And I don't have a server. Well, what I realized is like, no, you can install it on a Mac, on Windows, on literally anything. It takes like 5 minutes. And it did asset inventory. It even got my like Chamberlain MyQ garage door opener right.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm like, whoa, this is incredible. And so I've heard some great stories as far as like getting better visibility. It's not a product that implements any security controls, right?
Yeah.
But at least you can get a sense. And I've had even some of our customers tell me like, man, it's just light years ahead and does a bunch of crazy things as far as cross protocol to get the information.
So that works great for Zero Trust for the equipment, for the equipment in the workplace side. If we're dropping tools, another one to check out is Akita Software. Do you know Gene Yang? Have you seen what Akita's been building?
No, I haven't seen it.
It is wicked cool. So this is a dev tool with security properties, and this is for Zero Trust for workloads. What it does is it monitors network traffic. It monitors your application endpoints and actually builds out a full map and does the documentation, which is good because as a developer, I hate documentation back in the day. It builds out a full map and then the documentation of all your API endpoints and where your data is going and what kind of data that is. And can even find things like, oh, we expected a phone number and instead someone tried a SQL injection, or we expected a phone number, but they're entering in, UK phone numbers.
Oh, that's cool. It's called Akita, Akita.
Akita, yep, just like the anime software.
And is it for your home or is it for business?
It's for business, for developers. It's a developer tool.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. Some of these cool sites. I think it's funny. I mean, some of the things I'm sure everyone on this call will appreciate. So I just mentioned Rumble.run. You should check this out. It's free. Akita, I think, is the other one.
Yep.
Is that the right one?
No, that's Akita, that cloud. You want Akita Software.
Akita Software.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to throw Amanda under the bus here in a second. You ready for this one, Amanda? Amanda recommended that Amanda recommended that and everyone's got to let us know the Zero Trust for Networks book, right, by O'Reilly. I just want to point out, like, hey, they're frequently bought together. Amanda
Wait a
having to write
minute.
the Defensive Security Handbook. So I think that recommendation might be a little bit.
Hey, I recommended it because we actually had both of those guys on our podcast.
Oh,
And
cool.
they basically built a Zero Trust network from the ground up with their own software.
Yeah, they sold it to Okta, right?
no.
No, different
So
folks?
so what happened was, Beyond Trust, or I'm sorry, Operation Aurora happens, everyone gets compromised. Google's like, oh, we're going to do something about it. We're going to do Beyond Corp. And Google builds out Beyond Corp, which is Zero Trust implemented at the proxy level. So when people are connecting in, they're checked at the front end proxy before it goes out. Awesome. But Google has tons of money and all their apps are web, and they got full control of their ecosystem. And so great story, bro. Love the white papers, but it's kind of hard for other organizations to build. PagerDuty looks at it and goes, hey, that's cool. I love this idea of managing down trust. But how are we going to build this with off-the-shelf tools, and how are we going to support this when we have a lot of internally developed systems that we need to build, and we don't have Google money? And so PagerDuty built a Zero Trust for Networks approach. Not so heavy on the workforce conversation like we were talking about earlier, but using more of NAC and more of off-the-shelf tools to control trust like we're controlling privileges. So great story. I love the book. It's a little bit dated now, right? Because they built it in 15. I think the book came out in 17, and of course we're in 20. But still super sharp. I think Amanda posted the link to the breaking security. Well worth listening to.
Fun. Wow, you know a lot of the history on this. So as we're talking, I'm also writing a poll. What Zero Trust security controls do you have in place? I put multi-factor, device posturing, micro-segmentation, network segmentation, detection capabilities, and maybe these could be endpoint detection capabilities, and then maybe I'll say like logging detection capabilities. Those things sound good. Anything I'm missing?
Service mesh.
What is that? What is service mesh?
So when we're talking about Zero Trust for the workforce, we got a person as the identity, and they're authenticating to an application. It's that authentication point that we grab control, usually with multi-factor, and we determine if we trust them or not. When we're talking about Zero Trust for workloads, you got basically an overall application identity, right? My service, my API, whatever my phone's talking to when I'm ordering lunch after this meeting. And that needs to connect in and authenticate before it talks to other services. And so a lot of the ways these cloud apps are being built is a service mesh. So basically, the service identity, log in, and at that point of login, at that point of authentication, like, do I still trust you? Are you making calls that I expect? Are you coming from an IP address that we're hosting stuff on? Or are you just some pen tester that Amanda happens to know who's pretending to be an application service? We can go through all those checks and confirm that really is the identity.
Interesting. Yeah, I did. Everyone on the call, I did launch the poll, and I added service mesh, which so far 0 out of 7. And this is what I would typically, see. We have one person that's doing device posturing, right? Out of some of these different capabilities, but hey, we now have 2 that have service mesh. You can kind of see it in real time. And so far we have 10 out of 16 people that have voted, but multi-factor authentication 6 of 10. So there's some people that haven't. There's always gonna be some people that haven't, right? We're talking about defense in depth. Light on the device posturing, 2 out of 10 people that have responded. Micro-segmentation is nobody, which doesn't surprise me. It's network segmentation alone is tough to get in place.
Such a pain in the ass.
But micro-segmentation is a concept that's coming, I think, much faster nowadays. But that's the only one that we have 0 respondents to. And 2 people with service mesh, and I didn't even know what that was. Now I do. Thank you. It looks like logging detection. I'll wrap up in a second here. As far as ending the poll server, I can share the results. So, can you guys see it or no live? All right, I'm gonna end it so I can share the results so we can talk about it. You see them?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if any of this is surprises to you later.
So one of the things that device posturing is interesting, right? Because for forever and a day, every help desk guy has been told, don't put any more agents on the desktop. And it's partly the vendor's fault, because every vendor says, oh, our agent doesn't do anything. It only takes 5% of your CPU. And then we require 10 agents on the computer, and everyone's computers are running terribly. So there's been a lot of pushback about device posturing. But on the flip side is, if we can do it with a low touch point, if we can do it with a very simple agent, or very low impact approach, low touch approach, it's so vitally important, because we've seen now some of these attacks that are coming out, where people are being phished for their multi-factor, for example. And really the only way to prevent that attack from going forward is by using device posture, where that device that the person is coming from is also part of the authentication.
I think on the attack side too, like I'm just thinking out loud, and this might be a question that people can put in the chat, but it's like, what are people most concerned about attack wise? I know what I see every day as far as like the attacks that normally we get pulled into and then help out and respond to. But if anybody wants to throw in there, it's like, is there anything top of mind from your perspective on what attacks are the most relevant, or that you've seen, or that you're concerned about, that we can talk about as it relates to Zero Trust too? Because I think that's more or less like my opinion is like the majority of Zero Trust is all about knocking out as much of the attack surface as possible, right? So that you're not, I love Brian, APTs. Yeah, man, let's do it.
No.
Why do you say no? I'm just curious. I have my own opinions.
And I don't know if Brian is specifically trolling me about APT or not. One of my big concerns are, and I'd love to hear how Blumira tackles this, because I'd love to get more insight into what you guys do.
He's not trolling, he said.
Oh, he's not trolling. Well, okay, then
I'm biased, so I want you to answer first, then I'll give my opinion on this.
I'll give a serious answer then. What the problem with risk management, which is how so many of us have went forward with our security programs, is it can be easily derailed by a couple different things. The human mind is so easily hackable. What did you hear in the news recently? What was really scary? What was really impactful, right? And so one of the real risks I feel we live in with the world of security is, oh, I just heard about these super elite hacking squads that are in the Shadowlands and are dialing in from the deep dark web. And I saw this episode of Criminal Minds where they took over, and we get very concerned about the very advanced, sophisticated attackers. And at the same time, we've got kids who are just scanning our networks, popping things because we haven't patched them. We've got people who are doing phishing attacks, which is boring and no one wants to talk about, but is still the number one way you get in. We've got a slew of not advanced, not persistent threats that are much more likely to get us. This is in a very real way how so many people will be afraid of flying, but have no problem with driving, even though we know driving happens every day and is significantly, more impactful. So I think APT is certainly something to be concerned about, but I do think that knowing what real frequent risks are and addressing those with our detection, our prevention, should be more of the priority.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's kind of the case. I agree with you on that as well, which is the majority of the attack surface, right? I think the number one thing is like, well, if you reduce your attack surface, number one, you keep your endpoints and devices up to date, number two, and your servers and your infrastructure, right? That's going to be the best things you can do from an APT perspective. And so I do think, the concept, like for instance, like Duo has the Duo Network Gateway, or you look at other products like Zscaler, right? Like reducing visibility, reducing the attack surface down, so a lot of the stuff isn't accessible, is a good preventative measure, as we're talking about APTs, for instance. And APTs usually tend to take advantage of attack surface, right? Would be my take. I think the aspect of like, yeah, and this is a conversation I had recently with an analyst firm. I actually talked about it today, which is like, either you're really concerned with nation states and you're going to spend a ton of money on security in this area to detect any or very sophisticated APTs, right? Or you're going to harden your infrastructure, one of two things, or do both, right? Is more or less the reality. And so I think defense in depth is probably the biggest approach for most organizations to fighting things like APT. But like you said, like I didn't want to give my opinion, because my opinion is actually the same as yours, which is like, yeah, if you're chasing the APT side of things, more or less, like that's a 1% or less, right?
Yeah.
Whereas there's the 99% of the other things that come into play that you can really control. Is my take.
What do you guys think about ransomware? Like, how does Blumira, factor into that, right? Because that's something, again,
Oh yeah,
you
I
saw a
think
hospital system go down.
Yeah, here's the deal, right, with ransomware. And I can tell you, like Blumira, we're actually really well aligned with helping detect and stop it before it happens. And I can walk through a little bit of a few examples of attacks I've been on that we've helped customers with. But yeah, how it normally happens is like, I don't know, somewhere around like 60-75% originate from an open RDP connection or open SMB. Oh, so we detect when a public IP address connects over RDP or SMB, right? Well, even before that, they're doing reconnaissance scanning to figure out SMB and RDP ports are even open, right? So that would be an example where it's like, oh, yep, we're going to detect on that as well, the reconnaissance scanning, likely from bad IP addresses that are on threat feeds, right? Not always, right? So, and then from an attack perspective, once I get access to a host, right? Then I'm probably going to try and move laterally, detect via honeypot. I'm probably going to try and spin up or get a domain admin account, detect domain account creation. It's like, yeah, we're going to detect all those different things before that person actually gets to a place where they can deploy the ransomware, right? Or in a position where they can. And it does like that. It does happen, right? But that's the main thing, is that you have all these different areas that are trigger points that can catch them. Even if they don't come in via that means, like you're still going to catch them one way or the other, is the concept. And Amanda can probably talk deeper in this side than me, but that's what I see kind of time and time again when we're talking about things like ransomware.
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole 3 hours I can go on about detecting ransomware, but
Yeah. And Brian mentioned, and I think this is important. It's like I think it's important to consider what you're protecting on the state-sponsored threats and ATP, which I agree 100%. Right? I agree 100%. It's risk tolerance, right? On where to focus efforts and how much time there is. But reality, by and far, that I see is like, yeah, people still don't have the basics in place. So why focus on APT? Is I would say the 95% of companies, right? So.
And if we go off what Brian said, it reminds me of a story, and I think Amanda's heard me give this on stage, so I'm sorry I'm repeating it. But a while back in France, in Paris, in the Paris Zoo, there were poachers that took out one of the rhinoceros, and when I heard that news, my heart was broken. Obviously, you never want a poacher to take down an animal. And B, I couldn't rack my brain around. You think poachers are like in some poor country, and if you're in France, man, go to the Louvre, get some good food. Why are you messing around with animals, right? This made no sense to me. And then I did the asset valuation on a rhinoceros horn, and at the time it was a little bit under $1 million. So think about this from a zoo perspective. You have a rhinoceros. They're trusting people to come in and view that. They put up enough fence to make sure the rhinoceros doesn't get out and that people can't climb into the pen. And that's it. That was their entire security control, right? We've got a fence. We've got a couple ways that we evaluate trust before you get in to make sure we check your ID and get a ticket and everything else. That was their approach. If you gave them $1 million, I'm sorry, I said dollars, it's euros because this is Europe. If you gave them €1 million and you sat it on the ground, do you think their same security control would be a small fence and checking your ID and selling you a ticket at the gate? It would be a much different security approach, right? It would be a much different way that we're assessing trust before we let you in to see the rhinoceros. And I think that's a key part that we oftentimes forget in security. We think about asset valuation as to what it matters to us, but when we think about what it matters to the criminals, what may just be a nice animal in another exhibit at the zoo may in fact be millions of dollars just sitting out there that we're not protecting appropriately.
It's a interesting perspective to think about, turning that into, I mean, because yeah, that's probably the value, if not more, right, of that animal too. If you think about it. So, hey, Amanda, you were going to talk about ransomware a little bit more. Sorry, we cut you off.
No, it's fine. I mean, you covered a handful of them that I usually go over, but there's a bunch of stuff that you can do. Honeypots and honey tokens is definitely one thing. There's this thing that's pretty cool. It's called honey directories, that will show you a spike in file changes.
Nice.
That you can do as like an late stage early warning, for like if one device starts to get ransomware, which is kind of cool. But I mean, the majority of the stuff you need to do to stop ransomware are preventative and logging measures. Yeah, I could keep going more in depth, but I don't know how much time we have either, and it's not really relating to zero trust too much.
Yeah, I think zero trust, again, is the trust that we build up, starting with zero, while someone's authenticating before they get to a service, before they get to a resource, before they get to the rhinoceros, before they get to the file server. What happens after that point is usually, if you think about the kill chain, where ransomware comes in. So one of the things I liked about that approach, and when we get back to defense in depth, is you can see a real natural partnership and real natural depth there of where zero trust and dual would fit and where Blumira would fit to provide an overall security.
I'm sold. I'm kidding. No, it's 1:45. If anybody has any questions, feel free to add them in the chat. Amanda, you're doing our social media this week, right?
Dude, it's killing me.
And then how is that? And then also you're next week, you and Steve Reagan are talking about some fun stuff too. So you want to talk a little bit about that, and then we can answer any questions people have about zero trust.
Sure. I'm doing my best to do like 3 jobs at once this week. Marketing is a lot of work.
We literally just decided, like, let's hand marketing to Amanda for a week with about a day's notice. So it's fun.
I had nothing prepared. I just keep on coming up with random stuff. So if you want a little bit of entertainment, just go check us out on LinkedIn and Twitter. As I troll everybody that I possibly can with the time I have.
It's going good so far. What's today? What's the topic of today?
Just trolling Wolf.
Okay, that's good.
We need names for our little hedgehog guy, which is pretty cool.
Very cute.
I promised.
Didn't you order a bunch of hedgehogs?
I did. I ordered like 70, 80 little hedgehogs with Blumira t-shirts on. So I'm kind of excited about that.
How do people get them?
Well, you could come visit me in Ohio, or you could try and name our little hedgehog guy. There's been a lot of really good names so far. I'm kind of excited. And my cats are attacking each other. And then what else am I supposed to talk about? Oh, me and Steve Reagan next week are actually talking twice. I'm speaking with him and Martin McKay on Tuesday, I think. They're both from Akamai. and I don't know what we're talking about. He just sent me a DM earlier. And then on our roundtable, we're talking about just some common external exploits. Oh yeah, right there.
Yeah,
So
I love
Oh,
Steve
we had
should
a,
be
Dewey.
fun.
we had a nice slide for you next week. That should be fun as well. So thanks for the quick promotion on that. You did get some suggestions as far as names. Everyone wants to give names.
Yes, perfect.
Horace the Hedgehog,
Blumira's.
Coover.
Yeah, Phil.
Why
Make sure you
Coover?
Make sure you put those on LinkedIn or Twitter so I can count them in our actual list and send you something if you win.
Do you have a favorite so far?
Do I have a favorite? Yes. I don't think it's appropriate for
No.
Oh no. Oh no. There we go.
Wartenberg, I think, is my favorite.
I don't know what that is. I don't want to
Yeah.
Google it either.
Just Google it, Patrick. Just Google it.
Oh man.
As long as nothing to do with waffles.
That reminds me of, like, I think I was on the call with someone yesterday or earlier this week, and it's like it's probably Brian actually. No, it's like, yeah, when you're in IT, you figure out what people are searching for when the detections block them 100 times searching for the same things.
Oh yes.
Yeah, that can get awkward, right? Awkward conversations. I've also had that happen with my kids at school, which has been an interesting conversation. And I think that goes to show too, the school side is an interesting one, because it's like, man, they're at home now. In a lot of cases, they're using, like, the school gives them a device still, and it's like, I don't even know if I want them to use that device because of the amount of monitoring going on, right? But I haven't heard any trouble yet, so that's good so far. Hey, and then what do you see as far as future of Zero Trust? Like, what are the things that do people need to be thinking about that they're not thinking about today, or what things do you think are going to change in the market as it relates to Zero Trust?
Yeah.
Are we going negative trust?
Negative. Just keeping it down to zero. Keep going zero, then we get into the negatives. I was actually, and I said hello to Cooper on chat because I was online with him.
Now I see. I didn't see the chat. Like, you said, name it Coover.
Yeah.
No.
No. I was
feel
naming.
stupid.
Although Cooper would be a great name for a hedgehog. You know, if that wins
Yeah,
him
I
the
like
prize,
it.
go for it.
I like it. Thanks for joining, Coover.
I was with his ISC Square community just a little while ago, and what we were talking about was just this topic, the future of Zero Trust. And if you think about it, there's again two main components, right? The user identity and the device identity that come together, and then we evaluate policy. So there's two areas that I see a lot of room for improvement. One is around the context and conditions. What else can we tell about this authentication? What else can we tell about how they're behaving? Are there other fraud indicators or criminal indicators that we can suss out? I just was looking at a Zero Trust for phone systems. So you call in and they need to validate who you are, right? And the Zero Trust for phone system looks at what's the background noise of the phone? How do they enter in digits? What's their voice print? It looks at like 6 different factors to figure out if it really is them and they should trust them. Like, man, that is some really cool stuff. So we've got some great movement and technical advancement around the indicators of trust. The other thing that I'm spending a ton of time looking at right now is how do we form that strong identity? And today, of course, that's with a username and a password and another factor and maybe another factor. And let's add a third factor just to keep stacking it on and have a real strong authentication. One of the very intriguing directions of authentication in the next couple of years, I believe, is going to be passwordless. So you just have one strong factor, or maybe 2 strong factors, and get rid of the password altogether and use that as your form of strong user authentication. So I think both of those areas are pretty intriguing. One, due to the technical advancements that we can all build in preventing crime, and second, due to that better user experience that we can bring to our workforce.
All right, Snuff McGruff. No, I don't know if you know Snuff McGruff, but he's into preventing crime. That was like the Chicago crime prevention dog.
Oh yeah, man. Classic callback.
On your mention of phones, so like there's several other projects that I I'm focused on Blumira, but there's several other projects on my mind, and they're related to Zero Trust. Number one is email. And I think the social networks are doing a much better job at this, where email is an implicit allow all, which is why it's a freaking disaster. And my opinion is that it shouldn't be an implicit allow all. It should actually be an implicit deny. And similar to Facebook and LinkedIn and social media sites, you should accept the ability to receive email from someone when they first reach out to you. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that like I still don't freaking get it, other than the fact that everyone's stuck on Microsoft and Google platforms, and it's near impossible to change your provider. But I do think that taking that approach could solve like 99% of these email threats. Other than maybe the anomaly ones of the like awesome phishing attempt that just happened this past week. I don't know if you read about that, where like they basically do account takeover, and then they run the phishing campaigns from those accounts, highly targeted, and then compromise the other accounts. And the next thing you know, they have like, that stuff's pretty cool. That excited me, even though it's bad. Like that, when you see that stuff on the security side, but like, yeah, so much of this stuff, it's like, it's very simple and easy controls that are needed to solve for the problem. Like continuing to layer on monitoring for phishing emails and trying to like throw DNS detection when, hey, secure DNS over HTTPS is coming anyway, right? I'm just throwing stuff out there. You can slap me in the face if I'm wrong, but it's like, it's actually not, I don't think it's that difficult to solve for these problems, other than the incumbent vendors have a difficult time changing. And it's hard to build a platform that provides similar functionality. But yeah, that was one of my ideas that someone can take and run and build, so it exists for free. And then I think the phone SMS is the same way. Like, why am I getting 100 spam SMSs a day on my phone number? I should be able to just click a button. And I know there's block functionality now within Apple. In the telcos, there's a little bit more, but it's like, I just want a button that says deny, and it never reaches out to me again, right? It's not really rocket science, right? Is my approach. So I'm curious if anybody else has any thoughts on that. It does look like phishing email bot that then sends out more, which I think is what we're talking about. From password perspective, Brian said, will biometrics who you are step up? Will the average small company have a lower barrier to entry? I do think on the biometric side, like those are particularly interesting on the device itself. And what that does is essentially provides a hardened credential. And when you mix that biometrics with something like a U2F, essentially you eliminate the need for a credential, which where passwordless comes into play, right, Wolfgang?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
At the same time, there's bad implementations of the biometrics on these devices. And a good example of that, and I haven't seen this white paper, but I thought about writing it, which is like, well, based on how you implement an application with the biometric on the device, has big implications on whether it's even secure or not. And a good example of that is like, if you allow a biometric to be changed or a passcode to be used instead, and you don't detect that change and re-authenticate full stack, then it kind of loses the value of the biometric piece, right? My kids know my passcode on my phone. They don't know my fingerprint, right? Or they don't have my fingerprint. So what else any other thoughts you have on biometrics?
No, I think, back to the idea about APTs and whatnot. The idea is, well, they're going to steal my fingerprint and they're going to, print my face, and they're going to use that to get into my Windows Hello and get into my MacBook. And from there, they're going to get into applications. And from there, they're going to, and if you think about that partnered with the zero trust component, perhaps they do those things. Okay. But what about device authentication? What about using behavior analytics around, is this person coming from where I normally access? Are they going to apps I normally access? Are they behaving like I normally access? And if you start to chain together all these things that a criminal would have to do, it is significantly more advanced than most attacks.
Behavior analytics, yes. Yeah, that's a strong aspect is monitoring that behavior. So cool. Hey, we're at the top of the hour. I want to be mindful of time. We have 3 minutes. It's been fun hanging out with you today.
Same here.
Thanks, Amanda, for being a guest. And that you're going to be on next week talking with Steve Ragan, which will be a lot of fun. You should join us, Wolfgang.
I very well may. I love that guy.
So yeah, should be fun. Steve's from Akamai, which is a partner of Duos. I know we've done a lot of stuff there as well. So thanks, Wolfgang. Appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit about zero trust and how people can leverage the different principles. And thanks everyone for joining and attending today. It's been a lot of fun from my garage.
Thanks so much. Have a good one, everyone.
Take care.